Alrighty, so now in week 6, we get to take the next logical step, I suppose. If you look at what we've done, so we've learned a bit of Bootstrap. And so now what we're going to do is have you find a template or a theme based on Bootstrap. Okay, and then you're going to copy that. Now notice, by the way, the order of items here is a little different. We've seen this before, but you do the current topics, you do the copy, and then you do the analysis. You get to know that. So these are done in order is my point. So the first thing you want to do is find a Bootstrap template. Now, you want to spend a little time here, right? You want to actually spend some time, and I'm going to give you a starting point of, here's what to search for. We've been studying Bootstrap 4. I've talked about Bootstrap 5 at this point. So, it's not out yet, so I wouldn't necessarily use it, but you could if you wanted. But if you do search, like if you just go to Google and type Bootstrap 4, and I'll talk about license in a minute. And what I do is free, right? So that's the key. Now you can see that I've actually looked quite a bit through this list, and I recommend you do as well, because what you want to do is find one that resonates with what you're doing as far as your chosen theme, your chosen topic, what kind of site are you creating. So this first one is a pretty good place to start. And here's something I want you to kind of look for, which is an MIT license. Then you might go, well, what is an MIT license? Well, actually, let's go look at it real quick. Like in this example, here's a template. And if you scroll down, and I recommend, now this is not going to be true for all the sites, okay? But if it's well done, you're going to get information like this. When it was released, what Bootstrap version is it built on, and the license, okay? So you can find, I don't want you to spend any money doing this. If you do find one that costs a little money, but you're willing to pay it, that's really up to you. It's not what I require. But the reason I recommend looking generally for an MIT license is, you're granted permission to this free of charge, okay, without restriction, which is pretty unusual. It's actually kind of maybe a little hard for those of you that might be new to some of these ideas, that people freely share this stuff and you can do whatever you want with it. So sometimes they do have licensing that require you to give credit to who you got it from, but I always recommend, even if you aren't required to do that, it is a good idea. So going back to here, right? Look through these lists, find ones that resonate with you, and definitely look through some. Like I've shown you the first one, which is the result based on mine. Now, again, I changed my search term a couple of times to look at different ones. And as you can see, I looked through here and there were some good ones. I just caution you to make sure that, don't pay for it, but find one that resonates with you. Now, once you spend some time here, right, then before you actually say this is the one I want, let me tell you one thing I recommend you doing. And let me go back to, let me get rid of this. And this is my GitHub IO site. Let's say go back to here. Again, just because I think it's a good idea. Like if I go into this one, I get a couple options here, but one thing is a live preview. And I showed this on the attendance. So I would remove it. And I would look at this and I would see how it navigates. So if I look at the URL, as I showed you, if I hit contact, it moves me to the contact part of that page. I immediately know this is a single page site. Now, again, it's not that you can't use it. It's just that know that you're going to have to figure out how to do a multiple page site. Okay. So in this case, the other thing I would do is I would hit inspect. And I would be able to say, okay, now I see nav class, right? I look at container. I've seen some of this. Okay, I see that. I got a nav bar. I see I have, in this case, a ref, not an a ref, but a ref. Yeah, that confirms what I already believed about the fact that this is one page, but Rio said I could choose that. I just have to figure out how to create pages inside of there, which is really doable. So, but the key is spend a little time before you actually decide looking at the code. But also don't let the code completely run you off because sometimes you can look at this and be a little overwhelmed by it. Okay. So that's just my suggestion for how you approach this. Give it a little time. Find ones that hopefully are an MIT license that are free. Hopefully, relatively, like this is built on 4.5. I like that. Here's the other thing, and this is the benefit of doing early, is that I want you all to select different templates. I don't want to, the number of students in here is such that I know we can do that. Okay. So I'm going to choose this new age one right here. So this is the one I'm going to choose. So I want you to not choose this one, right? But if you absolutely love it, contact me, right? But in general. So the first thing you're going to do here on the topic is just hit a reply telling us which one you've chosen so we can see it, right? So my choice. Now, you could actually link this or just provide that link in there. And now what I want you to do is talk a little bit about like what, which ones how much did you look? What attracted you to this one? So like for me, this one, I did look quite a bit actually. This one was kind of appealing to me, though I liked that it had a navigation, which by the way, in this case, the navigation, I'm going to remove this, is actually that single page app. So I know I'm going to have to figure out how this thing works. I did spend some time looking at the code itself. I'm like, okay, large. Yeah, this looks like stuff I generally know, but if I don't know specifically, I could figure out. It's got a header. I have to figure out how that works, right? It does have jQuery, not my favorite, but again, I'm not going to use Bootstrap 5, so I'm good with that. So in this example, right, tell us a little bit about, how many did you look at? Why did you choose this one? What was your decision-making process? That's your writing, and you needed to reply to 2 of your fellow students. Again, choosing early here will be a good idea. Okay, now I'm not going to write because I'm not going to, take the time in here, but I'm telling you that's generally what I want you to do. Okay, so now that you've done that step, spend a little time. Now we're going to do the next step. So the next step is actually to copy this. Now I'm going to walk you through this with my example. Okay, here we are. Even though, and you could view it on, and by the way, you can totally view it on GitHub. I don't recommend copying it from GitHub because it is going to be a repo already. And what you're doing is putting it into your existing repo. So I don't recommend that. So what I recommend is just downloading a zip file. So in this case, I'm going to download this file, and notice how, if you can see it towards the bottom of the screen here, it actually did download here on my system. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say view all, and I can see that that came down into my local system, and I'm going to hit Finder. Now, if you're on a Windows computer, then that would be, of course, File Manager, I think, right? So now, at least on the Mac, right, and now it's a zip file, so I want to extract it before I do anything with it. So what I would do here is I could actually do this, but on Windows side, when you're doing this on the Windows side, when you right click, you get an option to extract all. So that's what you want to do. On the Mac side, you just double click, and what that does, double click. Yeah, there we go. So Mac has a little nicer way of doing this, I think, is that you just double click on the zip file, and it will actually take the contents of the zip file, extract it, and then put it into a folder. Okay. All right. So that step. So stop right there. Make sure you've chosen the one, you've got the folder, right? And now I can see I also have it in my downloads, which is here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to copy this whole folder. Okay. Because now what I'm going to do, and you can either do this through your VS Code, right? Or you can do this just through your file manager. I think I'm going to do it through the file manager because I just think given what we're doing, it's a little better interface. But let me show you how I'm going to do it. Now I'm going to navigate to my directory for 82. Now in here I have, remember, we're working right now on our GitHub IO sites, okay? So here is where I'm actually going to copy this. So I'm going to right click and I'm actually going to paste, okay? Now, if it did it right, let's see if it did. I should have gotten, oh, I did, right? So I got that directory into my GitHub IO site. Now, we're copying the whole thing over. So it's a fairly good size copy here, right? We're copying everything the template would need. And you might wonder, and I'm going to switch over to VS Code real quick. And actually in VS Code, I can see that there's a new subdirectory in here, which you would expect to see. And look at all these files that came with it. There's a ton of them. Now, once we finish all this work, you can totally delete this after the semester's over. The reason I have you do this step, okay, is because when you're going to start, and this is what we start doing on the Thursday item, is we start building our root index file is for our directory, and I'm going to show you the difference in a second. From this template idea, I recommend taking only pieces that you need, not the whole thing. And I'll explain that more as we get there. So now what I'm going to do, now that I have that copied over, I'm going to do a git status. I'm going to say, oh yeah, I got a whole new directory here. So now there's another command. We could do git add star. Let's see if that works. And then if I do git status again, oh yeah, I got all these new files, right? So I could do git commit. I guess before I go off that, there is another command I was playing around with today, just FYI. And it was mostly because I was doing some file management stuff. So I just want to introduce it here. So there's a git add period, which will pick up the deleted files as well. So if you run into anything like that, just know that that's there. So again, I'm going to do a git status. And if you haven't seen and wondered about this interface over here, this is just a way your editor will actually help try to make your Git version control workflow easier. Again, I don't recommend using it yet. Get through this class. Get too many gits in that statement. So now that I know I have it, I'm going to do git commit -m. Okay. Say adding chosen template to my site. Cool. Now I've added all those files at once. Now, one thing I could do is I could look at this before I start pushing it to the web. So that is one thing I could do. And if I wanted to, like, in here, and I'd be like, ooh, there's all these kinds of files, but I see this index file. So I could either open it here in the browser, right? So if I do that, let's see if it's actually opening it in my... Yeah, it's not yet. So let's try that again. So the other way you could do that, let me close a few things just to make this a little bit easier. Oh, yeah, this is actually template versus a theme. I think I'll put this in a link in case you want to see this. So let me just show you, because I actually use another piece of software to do what I'm trying to show you here. I use a product called Live Server. I don't require you install that here, but again, you're going to be working locally. So I want you to get used to this, and we've already seen this with some of our other work. So what I'm going to do is go back to my file manager, and I'm going to find that index page, and I'm going to open it. And that's what it looks like on my local system. Okay, so when I open that, I can see that I have this site as I saw it out on the web, and now I have it on my local system, okay? And it's in that GitHub directory. So now what I'm going to do back in here is now I'm going to do that last step where I do git push. And so now when I do git push, it's going to push all that stuff, and it could take depending on your internet speed and other things here, it could take a little bit of work. Okay, mine finished relatively quick. So now what does this mean? Let me actually go out to my GitHub interface, okay, for myself and show you. Okay, so now that if I go look at my GitHub IO, I'm going to see that I haven't, now this is from before, so don't worry about that. But in this case, I have that folder, right? So this is the folder you now need to share for this step, because this is our hands-on work, just to be clear. So now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to find that index page. And I'm going to go, oh, okay, I see the index page here, but guess what? It's not rendered as a web page. And that's the link I want you to give. And let me just set you up here right for this step right here, which is copying the template. Okay, because that's what you're doing. You're copying the template into your local system. Okay, so that's basically what we did, right? Yeah, so I'm just rereading this, right? Because you're going to start now next doing a review of your template, but for now you're just going to provide that. So what I'm showing you here is how to provide that link to us, and I'm first showing you don't do it this way. Okay, so what you want to do is you have that folder name, so it might be easy depending on, I can tell mine's really long. So what I would do is copy that. Now, why am I doing that? For the next step. So I'm going to go my GitHub IO. I'm going to go to that and I can see, oh, and for you, that's going to be what we've done so far with the CSS stuff. So to see the template, I'd do / and I would paste the name of that. And when I do that, then what I can see, and this is the link you're going to need to provide to us, okay, is this is the working template out on my GitHub IO site. So copy that. Okay. In here, provide us a link, right? You did the GitHub week, you provided us a link, review the file, at least 3 codes or files you want to learn about. So here's what I'm talking about on this last part, is that if I look at all of this, I'm like, wow, besides the index file, there's all this other stuff. It's a good place to start, which is the README file. Okay. So README files generally are intended to give you a lowdown on them, right? And it actually kind of gives you a little bit. Now, we're not doing NPM. NPM is something you learn when you get into JavaScript. We're not doing gulp. Gulp is something, and we do a little bit of research about this later, which is build processes, right? We're not going to do that for this. We're going to kind of strip out some of this stuff. I'll show you this a little bit, actually on the next item. But start there, and you might go, okay, is there anything in here? And you might think, okay, well, there's that gulp file. Why don't I research the gulp? Oh, there's a Travis YML file. I know what a git ignore is, so I can do that. So find at least something, because trust me, there's going to be some things in here that I'm guessing, based on your experience, I've never seen before. Of course, we've seen an HTML file. We know what that is. And then there's a license file. Oh, good. So now I've already talked about license, so you could do a little more research about that. So there's 2 steps to this part, and we're almost in the last part, but copy it, get it over, get it working, get the URL, and then do a little research, at least about 3 things you want to learn, because that leads you into the last part of this, which I'll start now. So now what you're going to do is start analyzing that code. So our lecture is kind of misnamed a little bit for this time. Your lecture is actually you doing some research. Okay, so I want you to get to know your template. Okay, so you can see here, I want you to build a new directory out on your private directory, or your private repo. Okay, so we're going to start a new markdown file. We're going to call it, and let me just do it so you can see it. So now, again, we're leaving our GitHub IO. We're going up to your private. We're going up to lecture. We're creating a new folder called template. Okay, under template, you're going to create a new file called readme.md. So your markdown file, okay? And then, so what you need to do now is you're going to do this starting this time and finishing next, is you're going to look at your index file. Okay, so I have how many pages? How many files? I have 227. Now, some of this becomes redundant. So it's like, you're building something and it's building it multiple times, like for here's social links. What's probably really important is the top part of this, but you can kind of just break this into two. So what I want you to do, and you'll spend some time here, is looking at the code itself, right? So some of this we've already covered around the viewport, but if you want to do some more research here, so here's what you're going to do, right? And I'm just going to briefly do it here on my. Remember, we are in our private looking at, so that's why I like having this folder open like this, right? So you're going to analyze, right, half of the files in your index.html for your selected template. Now, this is going to require you do some analysis and some, searching, right? You're going to go through here and look. I'm not going to be a stickler about exactly half, but I can see, okay, there's a mock-up. I wonder what that does. I maybe need to go do a little research. I see that there's some Google Fonts here. Maybe I need to go find out about Google Fonts. So you need to analyze all this. And here's where it gets really important, is when you're doing the nav, because we've seen some of this. I mean, nav bar, expand large. So what I'd want to see is like, here's the line that I'm analyzing, right? And we know it's also a block, by the way. So if I wanted to, I could roll that block up once I'm done to see that that block of code is 34 to 55, right? And there's other things within it. So what you're doing is some lines will need more analysis than others, but here's the key. The key is really for you to spend some time getting to know this template, because you're about to modify it. And the better you do here, the better you're going to do when you go to modify it. Okay, so this is where your searching skills come really handy. Again, we've covered some of this. So your file, so to submit this file, let me go back here. I would see the analysis of at least half, right? Now, again, this is probably the first part of this takes a little more. So maybe if you do a little less, I wouldn't be crazy, but I definitely want to see the very beginnings of the HTML, because that's really where a lot of stuff is happening. Some of this stuff starts to duplicate as we move down, but it's like, what's masthead? What's that doing? What's the container? H100. What is that class doing? And we know that these are bootstrap classes. Now, in this case, there actually is also a CSS file that is for the template itself. Okay, so some of this I'd have to go in. I could go look at that file because it's in the CSS directory. And I'd be like, okay, so I got some stuff in here. So I could, again, we're not analyzing the CSS, but sometimes that just goes hand in hand. Okay, so once you're done with your README file, then you're going to submit that URL here to show that you've done the first half of the analysis. Okay? All right, see you later.